31 years ago, a 10-year-old girl vanished on the familiar road from her home to the corner store, disappearing without a trace on a sweltering afternoon in Fresno, leaving her family and the entire community plunged into decades of terror. Authorities suspected a man who lived nearby, someone seen multiple times around the area that day, but with no body, no clear witnesses, and almost no leads to follow, the investigation quickly hit an absolute dead end. Yet for more than 3 decades, the little girl's loved ones never gave up hope, clinging to even the tiniest thing that might lead them to answers. Then one day, far from Fresno, an old scanned photograph accidentally revealed a detail everyone had missed, a detail powerful enough to turn the entire case upside down and shock everyone who had ever been involved. Before we dive into this haunting story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Fresno, California, late summer 1991. The dry signature Central Valley heat draped the streets like a thick blanket, the deep golden light of late afternoon stretching long across rooftops and the motionless rows of cottonwood trees. The neighborhood along Cedar Avenue still carried the slow pace of suburban life, the steady hum of air conditioners behind concrete walls, dogs barking from backyards, the ice cream truck's chime ringing out at the corner, and the last kids of summer clattering along the dusty curbs. Around 6:30 p.m., 10-year-old Emily Hartwell left her family's single-story house on the quiet block, a few coins in her pocket, and the usual excitement in her step. She told her mom she was just popping over to the little convenience store on Cedar Ave, only a few houses away, a route she'd walked all summer long. Emily was wearing a light blue t-shirt with slightly faded sleeves, jean shorts, and the old sneakers she treasured. In her hand was the pink hair tie she always twisted when she was excited. She skipped lightly down the front steps, walked along the peeling white line of the sidewalk, occasionally kicking a pebble or stopping to look at some chalk drawings left by the neighbor kids. People passing by, an older woman watering her plants, a man hosing down his pickup, a teenager opening the garage door, barely glanced at her. Emily crossed the small intersection, the sun slanting across her face. Then her shadow shrank as she stepped inside the familiar store. A minute later she came back out, holding her favorite candy, stepped over the threshold, and melted into the deepening orange of the Fresno evening. That was the last time anyone ever saw her. The sun dropped faster than usual, darkness slipped between the trees, and the temperature eased, but Emily still hadn't come home. At first her mom thought she'd just stopped to talk to a friend, or was sitting on someone's porch waiting for it to cool off. But then 20 minutes passed, 30 minutes, almost an hour. The silence on the street turned unnatural. Emily's parents stepped outside, calling her name up and down Cedar Avenue and into the side alleys. They asked neighbors, no one had seen her. They ran to the store, the owner said she'd left a long time ago. Tension settled over the block like thick fog. Her dad jogged the route she always took, eyes scanning every shadow, every lawn, every corner. Her mom stood in front of the store, hands shaking, repeatedly asking the clerk if any strangers had been around. No trace, no sound, no hint that Emily had turned off the path, stopped anywhere, or met someone she knew. Just the night swallowing the last of the daylight, and a nameless dread growing in the chests of everyone searching. When the clock hit the point where any kid should have been home long ago, Emily's family knew something was truly wrong. In the rising panic, they did the only thing left. They picked up the phone and called 911, launching the biggest search Fresno would see that year. Just 15 minutes after the Hartwells' call, the first Fresno Police Department patrol car slid onto the quiet street, yellow lights flashing through the spreading darkness. In 1991, Fresno PD didn't yet have the Amber Alert system that would come later, but they had their own protocol: respond immediately, lock down the last known route, and expand the search radius hour by hour. 2 officers stepped out, quickly took statements from Emily's parents, asked for detailed descriptions of her clothing, personality, usual habits, and whether she'd ever wandered outside the neighborhood. The mother's voice shook as she described the light blue shirt and favorite sneakers. The father just kept repeating, She was only going a short distance. She always came home before dark. She never went far. Another officer immediately started walking the route from the Hartwell house to the store. From years of experience, they knew the first hours were critical. Every tiny sign mattered. They swept flashlights across yards, through fences, down the narrow alleys between houses that looked harmless by day, but could hide anything at night. Neighbors began gathering on sidewalks, curiosity mixing with worry. A few realized something serious was happening when more patrol cars than usual showed up. Police kept asking, who was the last person to see Emily? Did anyone see her turn into a yard? Had any strangers been around the neighborhood lately? The answers were all the same. Didn't notice. I just saw her walk by, or I thought she'd gone home already. At 7:58 p.m., Fresno PD officially upgraded the case to missing child, elevated concern, triggering the next stage of protocol. An expanded search team was deployed. 3 patrol cars swept the area around Cedar Avenue. One group of officers walked the side streets in pairs. Another checked vacant lots and construction sites. Meanwhile, Emily's family stood at their gate, clinging to the faint hope that police would find her tucked in some hidden corner. But every passing minute made the air heavier. One officer sat Emily's dad on the front steps and asked him to go over the day in detail, dinner plans, who was home, where everyone had been, whether Emily had seemed upset, whether anyone had called the house. Simple questions, but part of the process to rule out a runaway. 2 blocks from the store, the clerk stood behind the glass, arms folded, watching police ask the same questions over and over about when Emily left. He admitted seeing her walk out but couldn't remember which direction she went because another customer came in right then. The window between 6:40 p.m. and 7 p.m. became an uncomfortable blank. No one could fill it. The search pushed deeper behind the store, where there was a small vacant lot and a row of old garages. One officer swept his light along the wall. Another opened each garage door to check inside. Families started turning on porch lights, illumination spilling over dry yellow lawns, as if the whole neighborhood had suddenly woken up to the shared fear. 3 more officers followed a dirt path out back where kids escaped the afternoon heat, searching every bush big enough for a child to hide in. Meanwhile, patrol car radios crackled with short updates, calling nearby UNI radios to converge on Cedar Avenue. A female officer was assigned to talk in depth with the mother about whether Emily ever stopped at anyone's house after buying snacks. The mom shook her head hard. No, she always came straight home. Always. That certainty made everything feel heavier. 8:30 p.m., not a single officer had found any sign Emily had started back toward the house. No one remembered seeing her head east or west. The neighborhood's silence, broken only by radio static and distant dogs, felt like a wall. Police decided to double the search radius, extending to parallel streets. A team began the door-to-door canvass, but the result was still just head shakes. Near 9 p.m., when night had fully settled over the area, the on-scene commander gave his first assessment. No indication Emily left on her own. A heavy silence fell over the Hartwell family when those words were spoken, and in the thick oppressive air of that late summer Fresno night, the urgent search was officially escalated to the highest level, putting the entire Cedar Avenue area on alert for a genuine abduction. Just minutes after the commander raised the alert to maximum, Fresno PD moved to the next phase, expanding the search to a full 1-mile radius around Emily's house in concentric circles. Officers split into small teams, each taking a direction outward from Cedar Avenue, marking off streets as they went. Fresno grows quieter the later it gets. The daytime furnace heat turned into a clinging muggy stillness that made the search more tense and exhausting. Flashlights swept over lawns, concrete walkways, dry wooden fences, exposing patches of darkness no one noticed by day. Every beam of light cut away another slice of night, only to reveal more terrifying emptiness. Emily was still nowhere. North of Cedar Avenue, near a rundown old playground, one team started checking every parked car. They peered into faded sedans, sun-bleached pickups, shining lights across back seats and floorboards. A Dodge Caravan parked tight against the curb got extra attention, but after a few minutes there was nothing. They marked it on the map and moved on. South, where a dirt road led to a wide vacant lot and a row of long abandoned garages, the second team kept a slow, methodical pace. The old garage doors groaned as they opened, revealing nothing but thick dust on cracked concrete. Each empty space swallowed the flashlight beam and gave back an uneasy quiet. Around 9:30 p.m., an officer named Ramirez spotted something at the edge of the lot, right by the footpath that cut behind the convenience store. His light lingered on an object half hidden in the dry grass. He crouched, carefully picked it up. It was a small silver bicycle. The frame had a few scratches, normal for a 10-year-old, but most importantly, it matched the exact description Emily's family had given. Ramirez immediately radioed the location and asked the team leader to confirm. Minutes later, 2 more officers arrived, shining lights around the discovery site. The bike lay on its side, front wheel turned inward, as if it had been dropped quickly or had fallen unnoticed long ago. No unusual damage, no drag marks, nothing else nearby. One officer took notes, marked the spot on the map, and had the area taped off. Most importantly, they didn't touch the bike again. In 1991, even though forensic technology wasn't as advanced as it would later become, Fresno PD followed the rule, until you know what evidence means. Preserve the scene and wait for the specialists in the morning. Ramirez stepped back, sweeping his light across the open lot. Sparse clumps of grass cast shadows in the weak beam, insects buzzed from distant fences, and whenever the wind brushed past, the sandy ground shifted slightly, giving an eerie, unsettling feeling. Still no clear small footprints, no disturbed soil, nothing to suggest Emily had fallen or been dragged. The scene made the bike's presence even stranger. It looked quietly abandoned, in a place she had no reason to be. News of the bike spread fast over the radio to the other teams. The eastern group sped up their sweep of the deeper dirt roads into the more desolate area kids used as shortcuts by day, but that turned menacing at night. They scanned both sides, checking empty lots and gaps behind walls. Still nothing more. To the west, the remaining officers checked every backyard along Cedar Avenue. They knocked, asked permission to search side yards and the spaces between houses and garages. Some residents looked worried and cooperated fully. A few hesitated from surprise, but eventually let them in. The back door of one small shed creaked open to reveal only old tools and rotting cardboard boxes. Everything was noted and cleared. Meanwhile, the on-scene commander studied the map as new marks were added constantly. In just 1 hour, every alley, shortcut, and side street within a 1-mile radius had been preliminarily swept. Red dots marking negative covered almost the entire map. Only one spot was circled boldly in ink: the bicycle's location. Near 10 p.m., teams researched the area around the bike, expanding another few dozen meters in every direction. A young officer named Collins spotted a small scrap of paper flipping in the breeze. He picked it up. It was just a meaningless torn corner, maybe from a notebook or receipt. He logged it, but didn't treat it as a lead. At this stage, everything had to be documented, but no premature connections were allowed. The mood in the neighborhood shifted as word spread. Residents stepped onto porches, watching flashlight beams sweep the lots, listening to the urgent voices on radios. A nameless panic crept house to house, but for the search teams, all emotion had to be pushed aside. They had one job: find the next sign. And as the Fresno night dragged on, that little silver bicycle lying silently in the vacant lot stood like a statement that Emily had somehow left her familiar route in a way no one could understand, leaving the searchers with dozens of questions and not a single answer. Once the clock passed 10 p.m., Fresno PD moved to the next phase, collecting statements from anyone who had been near Cedar Avenue during the window Emily vanished. The door-to-door teams gradually recorded 3 potentially relevant witness statements, but instead of narrowing the investigation, they opened a maze more tangled than the darkness covering the neighborhood. The first witness was Mr. Mitchell, a middle-aged man who lived 2 houses from the store. He said he'd just turned off the hose at 6:40 p.m. when he saw Emily walk past holding coins, looking like she was counting to see what she could buy. He remembered the exact time because he'd glanced at his watch to see how much daylight was left before dinner. He said Emily was alone, walking quickly but normally, no sign of fear or anyone following. For investigators, this was a solid timestamp that lined up with her entering the store. But when they moved 2 blocks further and spoke to the second witness, the timeline stopped matching. Mrs. Harriet Lewis, a retired woman who often read the paper on her porch in the afternoons, said that around 7:10 p.m., as the sunlight was fading from the rooftops, she saw a little girl in a light blue shirt cross the corner of Cedar Avenue and head toward a small alley. She clearly remembered the color of the shirt and the ponytail, but her statement contained one detail that made police pause. She said the girl was with an adult, looked like a man, though she couldn't see his face clearly because the sun was in her eyes. And most crucially, Mrs. Lewis insisted the man was leading the child by the hand, not just walking beside her. When police asked if she was sure about the 7:10 time, she nodded firmly. It was when the neighbor turned on their porch light and she folded her paper to go inside. If Mrs. Lewis was correct, Emily had left the store long before and was now with someone. Yet the clerk said she left before 7 o'clock and alone. The 6:40 and 7:10 marks created a worrying gap the team couldn't yet explain. They didn't rush to judge the reliability of each statement. They simply logged them, added them to the report, and marked the map. When officers reached the far end of Cedar Avenue, where streetlights grew sparse and trees thicker, they found the third witness, a child. About 8 years old, a boy named Jonah, who lived in the corner house, said he saw Emily walking with a stranger near the old playground. When asked what stranger meant, Jonah answered, "I'd never seen the guy before." He bent down and said something to Emily. Police asked, "Are you sure it was Emily?" Jonah nodded hard. "I saw the blue shirt and the ponytail like always." But when they asked what the man was wearing, Jonah's story shifted. First he said black shirt, minutes later gray shirt, then finally, "I don't remember." Kids often struggle to describe accurately, especially in twilight and under repeated questioning. Still, the detail of a stranger bending down to talk to Emily made police flag that area for closer examination the next morning. 3 statements, 6:40 p.m., 7:10 p.m., and a time Jonah couldn't pin down, didn't line up. One said Emily was alone, another said she was with an adult, and the child saw her talking to a stranger. Instead of creating a clear timeline, they made Emily's disappearance as murky as the Fresno streetlights that night. No one knew whether she had really left the store right away, whether someone approached her afterward, or whether what people remembered seeing was just mistaken memory. When investigators returned to the bike's location with the fresh statements, none of them could piece the puzzle together into anything logical. Every possibility remained open, every direction unclear, and in the thick, suffocating darkness of that late summer Fresno night, Emily Hartwell's disappearance had shifted in just the first few hours from a lost child case into a true mystery. By around 11 p.m., as the search teams began tightening the perimeter around the bicycle and had already covered nearly the entire 1-mile radius, investigators returned to the convenience store on Cedar Avenue for one final check before it got too dark. This was the last place Emily had been seen clearly, and it was also the spot where many child abduction cases leave traces, however tiny and easy to miss. Inside the store, cold white neon light poured down over the counter, giving the late-night scene an eerie feel. The owner, Mr. Daniels, leaned against the register, his face tight with worry. He agreed to let police review the footage from the old ceiling-mounted camera. The CCTV system was magnetic tape, low quality, the picture always blurry and jittering slightly whenever the air conditioning kicked on. An officer twisted the rewind knob, fast-forwarding through footage from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m., hoping to pin down exactly when Emily left. After a few minutes, they found a girl matching the description. Emily walked in around 6:42 p.m., let it down as she studied the candy shelf, then stepped up to the counter. She was there less than a minute before leaving. However, the direction she faced when she walked out was impossible to make out. The image was too grainy and showed only a bright glare outside. More importantly, police saw no one following her at that time. No one waiting by the door, no figure resembling what Mrs. Lewis had described. The screen showed only the ordinary comings and goings of regular customers, almost all irrelevant. The camera only covered a small slice of the front, not enough to tell which way Emily had gone. The tape's vagueness was frustrating. They had footage, yet still nothing definite. Around 11:15 p.m., as they finished reviewing the tape, an officer from the Western search team radioed that they'd found another item that might be connected. Everyone immediately left the store and headed back to the vacant lot where the bicycle had been discovered. There, flashlight beams now converged into scattered ribbons of light, illuminating the dry, dusty ground. Near the edge of the footpath, beside a low clump of grass, a young officer knelt next to the new find, a small cloth bag. Not torn, barely dirty, just lightly dusted with Fresno dirt. Embroidered on it in pale blue thread was Emily H., exactly the style the Hartwells used on their daughter's things so she wouldn't mix them up at school. When the commander arrived, he ordered the area immediately cordoned off and the scene left untouched. An officer took Polaroid photos to document the bag's exact position before it was collected as evidence. Emily's parents, kept back by police, could still see the unusual concentration of flashlights and guessed something new had been found. The mother covered her mouth. The father took a few steps toward the lot, but was gently stopped by an officer's calm words. Officer Collins, the one who'd found the scrap of paper earlier, knelt close to the ground, sweeping his light side to side for any sign the bag had been thrown or had fallen from Emily's hand. But the ground was flat, no scuffle marks, no drag lines, nothing to explain how the bag got there. The only clear fact, it was far too distant from the route Emily normally walked, almost certainly not something she dropped herself. For the first time, the search team began to sense another possibility. Emily may have been taken somewhere else after leaving the store. They didn't say it out loud, didn't put it in reports yet, but everyone felt it. The bag and the bicycle were dozens of meters apart, but formed no clear path. Police couldn't tell which had been left first, which second, or whether they had been placed there intentionally or accidentally. When the commander asked Mr. Daniels one last time whether Emily usually carried that bag when she went out, he nodded. She took it with her almost every time. That information made investigators even more uneasy. If Emily left the store with the bag, yet it ended up in the lot behind the store, far from the direction she normally walked home, then someone may have interfered with her journey. Still, following 1991 protocol, they simply logged the information and drew no conclusions. The two items, the bicycle and the bag, were noted separately, not connected, until the crime scene specialists arrived at dawn for detailed analysis. Approaching midnight, the vacant lot became the center of activity. Flashlight beams shot upward, radios crackled with tense bursts, and long unnatural silences stretched between them. No one knew what had happened to Emily, but with the appearance of the bag, something she always carried, the entire Cedar Avenue area seemed to shift atmosphere. This was no longer a case of a child simply wandering off. It was something else, something more serious, still hiding in the late-night Fresno darkness. Once Emily's cloth bag was collected and marked as the second piece of evidence, tension on Cedar Avenue reached its peak. Neighbors' anxious stares, the constant hiss of radios, and the frantic pace of the search teams made the whole block feel like it was balanced on a razor-thin line between hope and terror. And right in that atmosphere, the first suspect suddenly emerged, not because of clear evidence, but because of a string of coincidences that made police zero in on the wrong man. Close to midnight, while a team swept the area next to Cedar Avenue, they came across a man wandering along the wooden fence on the west side of the lot, where the bag had just been found. The man, later identified as Elliot Ward, was in his mid-40s, long tangled hair, clothes streaked with road dust. When flashlight beams hit him, he flinched, stepped back twice, and raised a hand to shield his face. An officer told him to stop and asked what he was doing in the neighborhood at this hour. Elliot answered in a shaky, halting voice that he was looking for a place to crash and came through here because he thought there were empty sheds. That wasn't factually wrong. The area did have old garages, but the timing and location instantly put the search team on high alert. When asked if he'd seen a little girl pass by, Elliot paused a long time before saying, "I think I saw a kid run past earlier, maybe." But when the officer pressed when, and with anyone, the answers grew inconsistent. First he said he saw her while it was still light, minutes later probably after dark, "I don't remember." At one point he insisted she was alone, then later said he saw an adult behind her. When asked to describe the adult, he shook his head. "Don't remember." Then added, "Maybe a gray shirt." The statements kept changing, contradicting each other within less than 10 minutes, making it impossible for police to ignore him. They asked to search his bag, an old torn backpack containing a few cans of food, a ratty blanket, and random odds and ends. Nothing related to Emily, but his presence near the scene at such a sensitive moment forced police to bring him in for further questioning. The Hartwells, still kept back from the lot, saw officers escort Elliot to a patrol car and heard neighbors whispering, "He must know something." Yet in many child disappearances, the first suspect is often the least involved, just someone in the wrong place at the wrong time, and Elliot Ward was a textbook example. In the temporary interview room that night, he kept changing his story, not because he was hiding anything, but because of the obvious panic and confusion of a homeless man unaccustomed to sharp, rapid-fire questions. He couldn't even remember exactly how he'd gotten to the area. After nearly 2 hours, police found no specific detail proving he had ever contacted Emily or knew anything about her disappearance. Everything he said was vague, illogical, and nothing lined up with the last confirmed sighting of Emily. But the real problem wasn't that Elliot was dangerous, it was that focusing on him cost them precious early minutes when real traces might still have been out there in the Fresno darkness. When Elliot was cleared just before dawn, investigators realized they had lost nearly 3 hours chasing a false lead, 3 hours that in child abductions often marked the difference between hope of recovery and total disappearance. And that Fresno night, no one knew that lost window would become one of the mistakes that kept the Emily Hartwell case unsolved for over 3 decades. As Fresno edged past midnight, the daytime furnace heat finally cooled, leaving a light breeze carrying the familiar Central Valley smell of dust and dry grass. After clearing suspect Elliot Ward, the search teams returned to their original task, one last sweep of everything they had seen, collected or casually noted during nearly 5 tense hours. All evidence within the 1-mile radius of Cedar Avenue had to be gathered before the crime scene specialists arrived at dawn. The commander split the officers into 3 groups, one to recheck the north side, one to go over the area around the convenience store, and one to return to the vacant lot where Emily's bicycle and bag had been found. They needed to make sure nothing was missed, no detail overlooked. In the north section, near the narrow alleys and old wooden fences, an officer noted a tiny thread caught on a protruding nail. The thread was thin, no longer than half a finger, a pale color hard to identify under flashlight. Crucially, it did not match the colors of Emily's clothes. She had worn a light blue t-shirt and jeans. This thread was beige with a yellowish tint, like thin jacket fabric, but on a Fresno night, where dozens of people had passed by over many days, a thread like that proved nothing. It was logged, bagged, but no one dared call it a real lid. Darkness made everything ambiguous, and the thread was just another shapeless puzzle piece, with no clear place in the bigger picture. Near the convenience store, the second group recorded a more interesting mark, a small shoe print in the sandy concrete mix exposed under the back wall. This print was clearer than anything on the dry lot. It looked like a child's shoe, but when investigators compared it to Emily's size, provided by the family, it didn't match. Emily's shoes were smaller and had a different sole pattern. This print was slightly larger, worn at the heel, the tread suggesting an older, well-used pair. That opened another possibility. Another child had been near the store around that time, or the print had been there for days. Fresno nights still had kids playing outside, even running around the store before dinner, so there was no way to know when the print appeared, or whether it had anything to do with Emily. Still, it was collected and carefully documented. In missing child cases, everything gets preserved even on 1% suspicion. The third group, back at the vacant lot where the bicycle and bag were found, noted one more detail, a half-meter-long metal scrape on the ground, fairly close to where the bike lay. Under flashlight it glinted faintly, as if something metallic had been dragged or slammed down. No one could say when it happened. Officers crouched to examine it, but found no accompanying signs, no metal fragments, nothing matching nearby. The ground there was a mix of dirt and small rocks, so scratches or drag marks were normal from bikes, carts, or metal containers passing through. Nothing at the scene tied the scrape directly to Emily's bicycle. Her bike was intact, no fresh dents or scratches, but its presence, combined with its proximity to the bike, forced them to log it. 3 pieces of evidence, a thread of unknown origin, a shoe print that wasn't Emily's, and a metal scrape that explained nothing. None strong enough to move the investigation forward, yet none could be ignored. Instead of providing leads, they raised more questions. Whose thread? Which child's shoe? What caused the metal mark? Or were they all just meaningless fragments of everyday life swept together by Fresno wind and dust that night? No one knew. None pointed in a specific direction. None led to a perpetrator. And when the clock passed 1 a.m., the search teams had to accept that everything found on the first night was just scattered signs, lost in chaos, ambiguity, and helplessness of a disappearance, with no explanation yet. The critical first hours were gone, and they had left no answers, only the feeling that Emily Hartwell had somehow left Cedar Avenue in a way no one understood, and every piece of evidence only made the story a little more incomprehensible. As the first night ended, Fresno PD investigators had nothing but scattered evidence, contradictory statements, and a map covered in X's marking nothing found, but instead of sharpening the search, everything they collected only blurred the picture further by the next morning. In the world of missing child investigations, the first 72 hours are make or break. For Emily Hartwell's case, those 3 days were consumed by wrong turns, noise, and a series of less than optimal choices that let the case slip out of control from the very start. Early the next morning, before the Fresno sun had even cleared the treetops, police started receiving a flood of calls from residents within a few miles. Someone swore they saw a girl, who looked like Emily, standing in an apartment hallway east of Cedar Avenue. Another said they spotted her riding her bike toward the gas station near Highway 41. An elderly man called to report he saw a girl being pulled into a black car, but he couldn't remember the plate, wasn't sure of the time, only that something wasn't right. One officer noted, 10 reports in the first 45 minutes of the day, 0 consistent. The case quickly turned into chasing shadows through fog. Investigators split up every time a new call came in, checking each tip, each description, each location, but every one was empty. The apartment hallway camera was broken. The gas station clerk on duty saw no little girl, and the man with the black car had the day wrong. He'd actually seen that the week before. While teams chased these unreliable reports, a bigger problem emerged. No one was focusing on the area near the lot where Emily's bike had been found. The investigation's focus flared and shifted with every phone call, as if the whole city were sprinkled with fleeting glimpses of Emily, none of them real. Day 2 got worse. An anonymous female caller claimed a suspicious-looking man lives in the house behind the convenience store. When police checked, they found only an elderly loner, with no car, no criminal history, and who never left his house the entire afternoon. Emily vanished. Again, another 3+ hours wasted. Day 3, a group of high school kids told police they saw a little girl fall into the canal, half a mile from Cedar Avenue. That triggered a small-scale water search with rescue team support. Result: nothing but floating trash. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing belonging to Emily. All these false reports didn't just slow the investigation. They devoured the golden hours that should have been spent on the area with actual evidence. And among the dozens of conflicting tips, investigators gradually missed a crucial detail someone only noticed the next morning. Not a single report lined up with the location of the bag and bicycle. Every call pointed east, north, west, except the one place with real evidence, where no one claimed to have seen anything. In a quick meeting at the end of Day 3, a veteran officer sighed while staring at the map covered in arrows pointing everywhere. we're chasing ghosts while the only real spot has been sitting untouched since night one. The harsh truth, the first 72 hours had passed with zero real progress. Fake leads, contradictory statements, and an investigation constantly yanked in new directions pushed Emily Hartwell's disappearance into the familiar gray zone of so many American child abduction cases. The zone where the longer time passes, the further the truth recedes. And Fresno had no idea those 3 days had laid the foundation for one of the city's longest-running cold cases. By 1992, as Fresno entered the first days of spring, Emily Hartwell's disappearance had become a recurring topic in police department meeting rooms, but no longer the urgent priority it had been at the start. Though the original team had spent the entire golden 72 hours chasing dozens of different tips, the final result was nothing but long, meaningless reports. All that remained was an ever-thickening file folder, full of vague statements, maps marked with irrelevant spots, and notes showing hundreds of man-hours spent without moving 1 inch closer to the truth. Cedar Avenue returned to its normal rhythm, or at least appeared to. Kids' bicycles reappeared on sidewalks in summer, the convenience store opened every evening, as if it had never been the last stop on Emily's journey, and houses along the street lit up again at dusk. But in the investigation rooms, Emily Hartwell's file still sat in the very first drawer, right under the label, Active, Pending Leads, a label that would probably stay there far longer than anyone expected. From 1992 to 1994, Fresno PD kept pursuing whatever leads remained, but one by one they were eliminated. A man who worked at a garage south of Cedar Avenue had once been considered a potential suspect because his schedule overlapped with Emily's disappearance, but time cards and multiple witnesses proved he wasn't near the area that evening. A teenager who lived near the store was questioned because his story kept changing day to day, but after thoroughly checking his schedule, police determined he was simply scared and adding imagined details. Anyone who had been anywhere near Cedar Avenue when Emily vanished was looked at, and then methodically cleared in the cold familiar way of long investigations. The thread from the fence, the strange shoe print behind the store, and the metal scrape on the lot were all kept in evidence bags, but without DNA, without the advanced analytical techniques of later decades, they remained meaningless objects in a cold storage drawer. Police pulled those items out for review a few times over the years, but every expert they asked gave the same answer: nothing to compare it to. The mid-1990s brought almost no change. Whenever a child went missing in another state, Fresno PD would receive a fax from federal investigators asking if it could be connected to Emily. They would review, compare characteristics, cross-check timelines, then close the file with the note, "No match." 2 cases once flagged as possible links, one in Bakersfield in 1995 and one in Modesto in 1997, were quickly ruled out due to different timelines and victim descriptions. Every time a spark of hope appeared from a report somewhere else, it went dark after a few phone calls. A veteran Fresno PD officer said in an internal meeting in 1996, "This case is like the shadow of a shadow. You think there's something to grab, you get close, and it's gone." That metaphor perfectly captured the state of Emily's file, a stack of documents sitting on the line between active investigation and forgotten case. In 1998, a new effort was attempted. They brought in a behavioral analyst from Sacramento to review the entire case file. The expert spent 3 weeks reading every statement, every field report, every scribbled-out note. In the end, his conclusion was no better. No point of convergence, no unified timeline, no repeating elements. In other words, he couldn't determine whether this was a random crime of opportunity, a chance encounter, or a premeditated act. Everything was vague. Every theory could be right, and just as easily wrong. No DNA to compare, no usable security camera footage, no witnesses whose details lined up, no physical evidence leading to a perpetrator, no arrests. Worse still, Cedar Avenue changed fast in those years. Old houses were renovated, some vacant lots became new construction, and the row of garages that had once been searched thoroughly was torn down. The physical space where Emily disappeared changed with time, slowly erasing the traces investigators had once clung to. By the end of 1999, the Emily Hartwell file no longer appeared on monthly meeting tables. It was moved to the cold case drawer, marked with a yellow sticker. All the police could do then was wait. Wait for someone to come forward with a sudden confession. Wait for new technology to unlock old evidence. Wait for a lead from somewhere far away to somehow match. But throughout the 1990s, none of that happened. Emily Hartwell's disappearance quietly faded, sinking into the darkness of hundreds of unsolved cases across California, a mystery buried deep in filing cabinets, waiting for something no one yet knew was coming. In the 2000s, Fresno, like many law enforcement agencies across the United States, began a major transition, digitizing old case files. Heavy metal cabinets full of paper reports, carbon copies, Polaroids, and handwritten notes were opened, sorted, scanned, and uploaded into brand new computer systems. For the Fresno Police Department, this wasn't just modernization, it was a way to clean up decades of piled-up documents and open the possibility of re-examining old cases with clearer data. Among the hundreds of files slated for conversion, Emily Hartwell's disappearance, even though it had been a cold case for nearly 10 years, remained a priority, because it involved a child. A small team of 4, mostly civilian technicians, plus 2 experienced officers, was tasked with refreshing the entire file, carefully scanning every page and indexing every document. The old folders were opened for the first time in nearly a decade. The paper had yellowed, edges frayed, and the handwriting of investigators from 1991 appeared like echoes from a chaotic moment. Crime scene diagrams, neighborhood maps, and lists of tip calls were all redigitized in order. During the process, they began noticing the original storage was disorganized. Pages clipped together out of sequence, short notes forgotten inside covers, loose sticky notes held only by rusty paper clips. And while piecing together those scattered fragments, a crucial detail, almost completely overlooked from the start, suddenly resurfaced. A young technician named Claire Morado, new to the digitization team, found a crossed-out note tucked between pages of the first night field reports. The scrap was half a notebook page, handwriting slanted and hurried, even smudged with an ink blot. It read, "Light-colored truck, returned to scene multiple times, 7 o'clock, 7:30. The dash at the beginning and the diagonal slash at the end showed someone had deliberately removed this note from the official report, but there was no explanation, no signature, no indication which officer wrote it. Claire paused a long time over that piece of paper. She called the digitization team leader over, and they started tracing whose note it might be. When cross-checked against the original 1991 reports, nothing mentioned a light-colored truck between 7 o'clock and 7:30 p.m., and no officer had logged a vehicle returning to the scene. The original records contained only the 3 contradictory witness statements, nothing else. Most suspicious of all, the fully crossed-out note wasn't part of the numbered report pages. It was clipped inside the file between 2 pages about the vacant lot search. Why had such a note been crossed out? Had the writer simply made a mistake, or did someone decide it was too vague to include? Or worse, had a detail been ignored from the very first night? Intrigued by the scrap, Claire kept looking for similar notes. Eventually she found a small hand-drawn sketch of a rectangular object labeled cargo van or panel van, hard to see clearly, light color, tucked in a stack of documents. This sketch was also crossed out, as if the author had decided to abandon the idea. An older officer on the team, who had worked at Fresno PD since the 1980s, pointed out that back then lots of older beige, cream, or light gray vehicles were common in the area, so the detail might have been dismissed as not specific enough. Still, the fact that both the sketch and the note were crossed out yet remained in the file was puzzling. The digitization team began noticing the inconsistency. Why was there no report mentioning a light-colored truck, yet a loose note claimed that vehicle returned to the scene multiple times? The phrase "returned to the scene" stood out especially. Had someone seen that truck pass the lot where Emily's bicycle was found, or appear during the window after she left the store? No official document clarified. Even the officer's name was missing. The note never made it into the final report, but its existence, despite being crossed out, planted a new suspicion in the digitization team's minds. Claire suggested they flag the document separately under anomaly, for possible future review, and that small decision, just marking a file, became the turning point later on. No one on the team that day knew they had just uncovered one of the few details that could connect the disappearance to a concrete entity more than a decade later. But thanks to a sharp pair of eyes and everyday diligence, the crossed-out note with its scribbled line escaped the fate of being forgotten in a drawer. From 2000 to 2010, the Emily Hartwell file made no progress. But beneath the dust of time, things once thought meaningless began to resurface, and a detail crossed out on the first night may never have truly wanted to stay buried. As the digitization process entered its second year, evidence once deemed inanalyzable in 1991 began to be re-examined from a new angle. Material analysis technology and synthetic fiber tracing had advanced far beyond the time Emily disappeared. Among the items moved to digital storage, the beige polyester thread, once dismissed as unimportant, became the focus of a group of young technicians. They didn't expect much. Most such fibers were mass-produced for decades. Still, they sent the sample to the Fresno County Materials Lab for modern testing. The results, returned after nearly a month, stunned everyone. The thread was not common polyester. It was woven in a special pattern belonging to a lightweight outer jacket line, made by a small Southern California clothing company, between 1989 and 1992. That line came in only 3 standard colors, and beige, the exact match for the thread found on the fence, was the best-selling color in 1990 and 1991. Even more crucial, the jacket was not widely distributed, sold in only 17 small stores across California, including one mall location in Fresno County. The head of the cold case unit at the time, Detective Mark Danner, received the lab report and immediately asked, if the thread came from a rare jacket line, could its owner have been near the scene the night Emily vanished? And if the thread snagged on a nail in the north side fence, had someone brushed against that fence at the critical moment? Thanks to the report, a case silent for nearly 15 years suddenly had new life. Danner requested the material information be sent to the California Retail Archive, which kept sales records for some defunct clothing brands. If they were lucky, they might pinpoint which store sold the jacket and even access purchase metadata, sales volume, hot zones, maybe even a store manager, who still remembered regular customers. After weeks of waiting, the answer came back. The beige polyester jacket was sold between 1989 and 1992, with a total of 241 units sold statewide. In Fresno County alone, only 28 were purchased, and all from a single store in Clovis, just a few miles from Emily's disappearance site. This was the biggest break in nearly 2 decades. To dig deeper, Fresno PD needed broader help. They sent a request to the California Bureau of Investigation (CBI) to pull records from the old store owner's tax filings, hoping any customer list still existed. Luckily, the owner had kept a handwritten ledger of high-value regular customers, including many jacket purchases. The ledger was found in the former owner's storage, miraculously spared when the store closed in 1994. Though incomplete, CBI copied all 47 handwritten pages and forwarded them to Fresno PD for cross-referencing with 1991 resident databases. Names written in faded blue ink, some smudged, some only initials, but among the dozens of entries, one stood out, the initials, BE. Next to beige jacket, large, purchased in July 1991, 1 month before Emily vanished. The cold case team began narrowing down customers. By comparing the list to Fresno County 1991 resident records, they gradually eliminated people who didn't live near Cedar Avenue at the time. Of all the vague names and initials, most were ruled out. Many had moved away long ago, some had died, some had bought the jacket for distant relatives. In the end, only 3 names showed any match to the Fresno-Clovis area during the disappearance window. 1. Gregory Vance, residing in Clovis in 1991, worked in route delivery. 2. Brett Ellison, lived near Shields Ave, not far from the scene. 3. Bruce Etter, had seasonal work near the convenience store in 1991. All three had lived within a 5-mile radius of Cedar Avenue when Emily disappeared. All three had jobs that allowed them to move freely around Fresno. And most importantly, all three could have owned one of the rare beige jackets. Detective Danner and the cold case team went back through the old 1991 files to see if any of the three names had ever surfaced. To their shock, none of them appeared on the original suspect list. No witness mentioned them. No report listed them in the initial canvass. No police document showed they had ever been questioned. That opened two terrifying possibilities. Either they were innocent and completely unrelated, or for years, investigators had missed the only people who owned an item with a physical link to the scene the night Emily vanished. Danner pulled up the crossed-out note Claire had found, light-colored truck, returned to scene multiple times, 7 o'clock, 7:30. Every word now carried new weight. One of the three men on the short list currently or previously owned a light-colored truck, yet the 1991 files never recorded it, or it had been forgotten, or never properly flagged. In an early 2010 meeting, Danner placed both the crossed-out note and the fiber analysis report on the table, and told the cold case team, if we're down to three names after 2 decades, this is the first real sign the case can still be broken. For the first time in 19 years, the Emily Hartwell file was no longer standing still. A turning point had begun, quietly but surely, from a tiny thread no one in 1991 thought could ever mean anything. In 2012, exactly 20 years after Emily Hartwell entered Fresno PD's cold case list, a second turning point, this time from halfway around the world, arrived in a way no one could have predicted. It didn't come from a new witness, a forgotten piece of evidence, or a confession. It came from Denmark, from an investigation that had nothing to do with Fresno, California, or a 10-year-old girl who vanished in 1991. In February of that year, the Danish National Cyber Crime Center raided an apartment in Aarhus, Denmark, to dismantle a large-scale online fraud ring. The suspects operated through fake transactions, trafficking stolen credit cards, and running offshore accounts for money laundering. Among the seized items were several old laptops, external hard drives, and memory cards, all sealed for analysis. Most contained only routine financial crime data, but one large-capacity hard drive caught a technician's attention because it held an unusually high number of old scanned photo files. The drive contained a folder named USA_OLD_FIL-IM. Inside were over 200 TIFF and JPG files, all scanned from old Kodak rolls, mostly landscapes, streets, warehouses, vacant lots, everything with a late 1980s/early 1990s American feel. At first glance, it seemed like someone's decades-old photo collection, but the suspicious part was that the folder had no connection to the digital fraud activities. It was as if it had been accidentally bundled onto a drive used solely for crime. As a Danish technician opened the images to check metadata, he noticed most metadata had been stripped or altered, common for scanned photos, but odd, since all the files appeared processed at the same time years earlier. One file in the middle of the list, scan_1991_08_11, TF, drew his eye. The photo was slightly blurry, colors faded like old film. But in the lower left corner was a very clear detail, a girl around 9-10 years old standing next to the metal door of an industrial warehouse. Her face wasn't directly toward the lens, but the low ponytail, small build and light-colored t-shirt made the technician pause longer than usual. He zoomed in, and that was when he noticed something even more disturbing. In the window glass behind the girl, part of a man's reflection was visible, someone standing outside the frame. It wasn't the child's reflection. The figure was too tall, and only a few details showed shirt buttons, a thick fabric collar, and a dark blur like an arm. An uneasy feeling hit immediately. He forwarded the photo to his supervisor. The unit decided to examine the entire folder. They realized the 1991 scanned images had one thing in common. Most were taken in American suburban or industrial areas, and 7 were marked 08_1991, August 1991, the exact month Emily Hartwell disappeared. But to pinpoint the exact location, they needed help from the United States. Suspecting this might be evidence tied to an unsolved case, Danish police sent the entire photo folder to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, IC, the agency with a branch handling digital evidence in cross-border cases. When ICE received the data, a specialized analysis team began sifting through the images. Most were deemed unrelated: warehouses, strip malls, parking lots. But the file scan_1991_08_11.tf was flagged for U.S. review because it contained a child and could be tied to a missing person case. ICE forwarded the photo to the FBI's International Cooperation Unit, which handles any old images of children found in foreign data. When an FBI agent opened the picture on his screen, everything started to shift. In just 30 seconds of looking at the girl's side profile, he sat bolt upright in his chair. He pulled up the NCMEC National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database, entered estimated age, hairstyle, and height markers. Among the results that popped up, one name made him stop breathing for a second: Emily Hartwell, missing from Fresno, California, August 1991. The scanned photo from Denmark looked terrifyingly like Emily. The FBI immediately contacted Fresno PD. The next morning, in the Fresno Cold Case Unit office, Detective Mark Danner opened the email and its attached image. He zoomed in on the little girl, then zoomed again on the glass panel behind her. Still the reflection of the man, partially obscured but undeniably there. He couldn't see the face, but the buttons and the dark patch at the shoulder instantly reminded him of the polyester fiber report from a few months earlier. Beige jacket, rare line, sold in Fresno 1989, 1992. Beige thread, found on the fence near where the bicycle was discovered. And now, a man in the reflection possibly wearing the exact same type of jacket. The photo had been scanned at an unknown later date, but the file name and sequence in the folder placed it among the August 1991 batch. If the girl in the picture really was Emily, that meant Emily was alive at least a few hours, or a few days after she left the convenience store. From 1991 to 2012, more than 2 decades, no one had ever had information proving this. When the photo was brought into the Fresno PD briefing room, the air went so quiet, you could hear the air conditioning. Investigators stared at the image like they were looking straight through time. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Danner broke the silence. "We need to pinpoint this location immediately. That metal door, it's not a residential door, it's industrial." And in that moment, everything began falling into place. The crossed-out note, the beige fiber, the 3 men who bought the rare jacket, and now the reflection of a man standing beside an industrial warehouse door in the exact month Emily disappeared. Fresno PD had never been this close to a real lead in 20 years, and they didn't yet know that this photo was only the first piece of a much larger chain of revelations, one that would lead them to the truth, and eventually to the door of the person they had missed in 1991. The morning after the photo from Denmark arrived in Fresno, Detective Mark Danner contacted the FBI Digital Imaging and Forensics Center in Quantico, which specializes in blurry photos, scanned film, and degraded documents. Within hours, the TF file showing the girl beside the warehouse door was sent to the imaging team. They couldn't invent what wasn't there, but they could pull out hidden details the naked eye and regular monitors usually miss. This wasn't modern AI reconstruction. It was 2012 forensic tools: color channel separation, gamma adjustment, texture enhancement, and material comparison. The first thing the forensic team noticed: the metal door directly behind the girl was not a standard warehouse door. When zoomed to maximum and run through micro-contrast filters, they saw the vertical ridges along the door were uneven. An FBI metal materials expert identified it as Series 180C corrugated steel, produced only by a mill in Clovis, California, from 1988 to 1993. That door model had been sold to roughly 21 small industrial facilities in the Fresno-Clovis area. Clovis Steel Works, the maker, had shut down in 1996, but its sales records still existed on paper at county records. When that information reached Fresno PD, Danner immediately ordered a search for any locations that had ever used the 180C door. The results narrowed it down to 2 surviving industrial warehouse complexes in 2012, both just a few miles from Cedar Avenue. The sites had once been temporary distribution depots for various small companies. One had been abandoned for nearly 15 years, the other was still active, but had changed owners multiple times. For the first time, thanks to the photo, Fresno police had a concrete location instead of vague descriptions. Meanwhile, the FBI forensic team kept dissecting the lighting. Scanned Kodak film always has a slight yellowish shift, but when they isolated the blue and green channels, something stood out. The light hitting the girl's face was not sunlight. The characteristics showed a narrow, even band with a faint orange tint, typical of low-pressure sodium lamps commonly used inside warehouses or old industrial buildings. The technicians explained, late afternoon outdoor light diffuses widely and doesn't create sharp shadows along the hairline. But in the photo, the shadow line across the top of the girl's forehead was sharper than normal, indicating an overhead source in an enclosed space, roughly 8–10 feet high, like warehouse interior lighting. This confirmed one critical fact: the photo was not taken outdoors, even though the background looked like an exterior warehouse door. Instead, it was shot inside an industrial facility, possibly right near the entrance door. A lighting expert on the forensic team also pointed out that the light reflecting off the door's window glass hit the shoulder of the man in the reflection. Though not clear enough for facial or biometric identification, they could tell the man's shirt was not cotton, it was cross-woven synthetic material, very close to the high-grade polyester used in the rare jacket line Fresno PD had identified months earlier. This made Detective Danner immediately flag the direct link between the photo and the beige fiber evidence. Analysis of the background behind the girl opened another door. Despite blur and grain, when brightness was boosted and grain removal filters applied, a faint outline appeared in the right corner, what looked like a raised concrete foundation slab, the kind found only in 2 late 1980C warehouse complexes in Clovis and Fresno. That slab style was not common in small storage units. It appeared only in warehouses once used as goods distribution points. When the forensic team sent their detailed report, Fresno PD flagged 2 matching locations: one Bellamy Industrial Park, Clovis, California, built 1988, 180C doors, some units vacant since 1997. 2. North Weber Distribution Lot, Fresno, California, 180C doors, raised concrete slab, temporarily leased in 1991 by 3 small companies, one of which was a delivery service that used light-colored trucks. The overlap of the steel door, sodium lighting, raised slab, plus the reflection of a beige polyester jacket made everything line up in a way no one had expected when the case was first digitized. This was no longer a random anonymous photo, it was a map pointing straight to the environment where Emily had last appeared. In an internal meeting that lasted over 3 hours, Danner walked the Fresno cold case team through every step of the analysis. Standing in front of the giant projected image, he pointed at the enlarged photo and said, "The girl in this picture is almost certainly Emily. The metal door behind her was made only in Clovis, the lighting is warehouse lighting, and the man's reflection matches the jacket we've been chasing." The younger investigators, many of whom weren't even in the job in 1991, felt the weight of every detail. The veterans went quiet, realizing they were finally seeing something they'd never had a chance to see before, a real piece from the place Emily had been taken, not vague statements or directionless evidence. Ambient forensics, environmental analysis, was applied once more. An expert determined the raised concrete slab in the photo had a very distinctive texture, matching slabs poured by only 2 local companies in 1989. When cross-checked with construction maps, Fresno PD confirmed only 2 warehouses in the entire Fresno, Clovis area used that exact slab type. That was the 4th confirmation pointing in the same direction. All the technical data from the photo analysis converged on one single point. The picture was taken in one of two industrial warehouse complexes, Bellamy Industrial Park or North Weber Distribution Lot, in August 1991. And when Danner looked at the photo one more time, he realized something even more important. If Emily was inside an industrial warehouse, the man in the reflection, the one standing right behind the camera, was almost certainly the person who took her off Cedar Avenue. After 21 years, the Emily Hartwell case was no longer just a mystery locked in a filing cabinet. A single photo from a country 8,800 kilometers away from California had finally shown them where to look, and Fresno PD was about to enter the first real investigative phase since 1991. Once the FBI photo analysis confirmed the picture of Emily was taken inside a warehouse, and the man behind the camera might be wearing the rare beige polyester jacket, Fresno PD dug deeper into another detail. The image itself revealed the ground surface in front of the warehouse door. When the forensic team expanded the frame edges and boosted contrast in the floor area, they spotted what looked like a meaningless mark, a short, slightly curved rubber streak, near the right edge of the frame. It was only a few inches long and faint, but when run through edge enhancement, the tire tread pattern emerged clearer than expected. Those tread lines did not belong to any modern 2000s tire. An FBI tire expert concluded it was a double chevron pattern, herringbone style, common on 1980s delivery trucks. That pattern was not used on passenger cars. It was typical of panel vans or light trucks operating in industrial areas. More crucially, the tire profile in the photo matched the proportions of a rear truck tire, not a front one. That meant the vehicle had stopped right beside the door, very possibly at the exact moment the photo was taken. From there, Fresno PD opened a new line of inquiry, identifying truck models that could leave a double chevron mark. A Fresno traffic unit technician reviewed tire records from 1986, 1992, and concluded only a few van truck lines came factory equipped with that exact double chevron tread. The short list came down to 3 models common in California. 1. Ford Econoline E-Series, 1988, 1992, Chevy G-Series, van, 1987, 1991. 3. Dodge Ram van, 1988, 1990, but when the stop angle, tread width ratio, and edge curvature in the photo were compared, the forensic team leaned heavily toward a 1988, 1992, Ford Econoline. That was the light-duty van rented in huge numbers by delivery companies, warehouse distributors, and repair services throughout the 1990s, and especially common around Fresno. One expert put it plainly, this mark has the curvature of an Econoline. The groove depth also shows the tire had been in use for a while, not brand new. With that lead, Fresno PD ran a California DMV search filtering for registered owners of 1988, 1992 Ford Econolines in the Fresno-Clovis area. The results were both exciting and daunting. In 1991, there were 117 such vans registered locally, but when they added the filters, had lived or worked within a 5-mile radius of Cedar Avenue, had a history of employment in the Fresno-Clovis industrial zone, owned the van in August 1991, the list shrank to 17. At the morning briefing, Danner pinned the list of 17 names to the board. The entire cold case team stared in silence. 17 was small, but not small enough to close the case yet. However, when they began cross-referencing that list with the 3 men who had bought the rare polyester jacket, Gregory Vance, Brett Ellison, Bruce Eder, one name lit up immediately. Gregory Vance. Gregory Vance was one of the 17 Econoline owners, and one of the 3 who purchased a beige jacket in Clovis in 1991. When they pulled Vance's 1991 residency records, they found his house that year was less than 3.4 miles from Cedar Avenue. He worked at North Weber Distribution Lot at the exact time the photo could have been taken. His employer rented temporary warehouse space at Clovis Industrial Park, the site with the 180C doors, 3 separate investigative threads, the jacket, the warehouse photo, and the double chevron tire mark, all pointed to the same spot, Gregory Vance. In the 1991 files, Gregory Vance had never been questioned by police. He was not a witness, not a suspect, and did not appear in any statement. Back then, he was just a 32-year-old delivery driver, living an ordinary life with no criminal record. He had been completely invisible throughout 3 decades of a cold case, but in 2012, through a chain of events almost too incredible to believe, from a scanned photo in Denmark, to a beige thread on a fence, to a ghost-like chevron tire mark, everything now revolved around Vance, as if the scattered pieces of the puzzle that had lain apart for 21 years had finally decided to snap together. Danner circled Vance's name in red. Then he looked at the team and said one sentence that left the room dead silent. Gregory Vance is no longer a name on a list, he is the name. The investigation shifted into a new phase, no longer chasing shadows, but now tracking a real person. 21 years after the disappearance, the Emily Hartwell case was about to enter its most intense chapter since the night Cedar Avenue went dark in 1991. Gregory Vance had never drawn attention in Fresno PD files throughout the 1990s. He was never mentioned in any witness interview, never reported for suspicious behavior, and had no prior arrests or criminal record. To the 1991 police, he was just a 32-year-old man who worked hard in the delivery business and lived in a quiet neighborhood a few miles from Cedar Avenue. There had been no reason for him to appear on any suspect list, until the case was digitized and reconnected by clues no one in 1991 could have linked. When Fresno PD pulled up Gregory Vance's full file on the briefing room screen, the picture of the man began to sharpen. Born 1959, raised in Clovis, local high school graduate who went straight to work. From 1987 to 1994, he drove delivery routes for Weber Industrial Services, a small company that moved materials and parts between facilities in the Fresno-Clovis area. The key detail: Weber Industrial used warehouse space at North Weber Distribution Lot, the exact complex identified as matching the steel 180C door in the Denmark photo. The second thing that made Vance stand out, his 1991 work schedule showed his delivery route passed through the Cedar Avenue area every week, especially on Wednesdays and Fridays, the days his company received and distributed goods to South Fresno facilities. Emily Hartwell disappeared on a Friday, August 2, 1991. But when Danner requested a cross-check of that month's work schedule, something strange appeared. Vance had taken the exact day Emily disappeared off. Not only had he requested leave, he had written family matter as the reason on the form. For the rest of the year he almost never took another day off, just that one. The surprising part wasn't the day off itself, but the timing. In 1991 no one had seen it as suspicious. Workers taking a single personal day was normal, but placed in the 2012 context, after the warehouse photo surfaced, after Vance's Ford Econoline was identified as one of the 17 still in existence, after the beige jacket matched the evidence, that day off was no longer ordinary. It had become a suspiciously fitting piece in the puzzle. Continuing the file review, Fresno PD uncovered another detail that had never been examined: the 1991 delivery logs of Weber Industrial Services. The company still had photocopies of the August schedule, boxed away in storage. When they opened it, another discovery made the whole team sit up. The August log was missing exactly 3 pages, the 3 pages covering July 31st to August 2nd, the precise window of Emily's disappearance. The remaining pages were sequentially numbered: 193, 194, 195, but between 194 and 198, there was a gap. When they asked the current storage manager of what was now a subsidiary of a larger corporation, he said losing a few pages from old records was common after multiple office moves. Detective Danner didn't buy the coincidence. He noted in the file, 3 pages missing, exact timeframe Emily vanished. Coincides with Vance's day off. Digging further, the team wanted to know Vance's connection to the 2 warehouse complexes in 1991. Result: Vance was one of the 3 main drivers assigned to deliveries at North Weber Distribution Lot, the site with the exact steel door from the photo. Records showed that throughout 1991, Vance made a total of 42 deliveries to that warehouse. His only Friday cycle day off fell exactly on the day Emily disappeared. Vance's personal file also contained details that weren't abnormal on their own, but were worth noting. Lived alone in 1991, in a small apartment near Ashland Ave, regularly worked solo, little social interaction, steady employment history, no disciplinary issues. In 1992, switched to internal delivery for another company, then left Fresno entirely. In 1994, another striking point, when they checked the 1991 vehicle registration, Vance's Ford Econoline was light beige. This was critical, because the crossed-out 1991 note had also mentioned, light-colored truck, returned to scene multiple times. In the investigative briefing, Danner laid out every Vance detail in columns on the board. 1. Beige polyester fiber rare jacket, Vance on the buyer list. 2. 1991 photo Clovis warehouse door, man reflected wearing beige synthetic jacket. 3. Chevron tire mark, 1988, 1992 Ford Econoline, Vance owned 1. 4. Delivery route passed through the area where Emily vanished. 5. Unusual day off, exact date of the incident. 6. 3 missing log paged, exact dates 7:30, firsts, August 2, 1991. 7. Worked at warehouse matching photo characteristics. No single detail was enough to charge, but lined up side by side, they were no longer isolated fragments. They were starting to form a structure. A younger investigator muttered, "If this is all just coincidence, there are too many coincidences." Danner didn't answer. He knew the case still needed many more steps before they could summon or search, but he also knew Gregory Vance had just become the first primary person of interest in over 20 years, and for the first time they had a real person, a real file, a real pattern to follow. And the investigation was about to move into direct confrontation with the name the case had missed from the very first night in 1991. The moment Gregory Vance was circled as the prime suspect, Fresno PD and the FBI coordinated a 30-day surveillance operation, a standard step in cold cases, when evidence isn't yet strong enough for a search warrant. Vance now lived in Reedley, a small town about 30 minutes from Fresno, working seasonal jobs for a small transport company, and keeping a very regular routine. He had no idea he was being watched. The surveillance plan included vehicle tailing, daily routine tracking, trash pulls under abandoned property rules, logging any unusual behavior, cross-checking against 1991 warehouse data. The first week was slow. Vance went to work on time, came home on time, shopped at the same supermarket, filled gas at the same station, no contact with anyone suspicious, no signs of evasion or awareness. He looked like a quiet middle-aged man with nothing noteworthy. On day 8, however, the surveillance team logged the first anomaly. Vance threw out a large trash bag at 4:30 a.m., a time when almost everyone was still asleep. The act wasn't illegal, but it stood out because Vance normally took the trash out in the afternoon. The team legally retrieved the bag and brought it in for examination. Inside the bag, they found nothing directly tied to Emily Hartwell, but one small item caught the forensics team's eye: a rare tube of photo-mounting glue made in the late 1980s, with a red twist cap, once common in Kodak print shops. Next to it were a few yellowed photo corners that appeared to have been peeled from an old album. None of the photos were intact, but the adhesive on the back matched the exact chemical composition of the glue residue found on the backs of the scanned images from the Danish hard drive. This made investigators wonder, was Vance destroying old photographs? In week 2, the team noted another pattern. Every 2 weeks Vance burned old papers in a small burn barrel behind the house. They couldn't stop him. Legally, he could destroy his own property, but they logged the dates, the types of paper he carried out, and his demeanor. The first time they watched him burn dozens of crumpled sheets. The second time he burned small leather-bound notebooks that looked like log books. Vance did it calmly, unhurried, but deliberately and regularly. Those notebooks immediately reminded the cold case team of the 3 missing delivery log pages from 1991. On day 17, the team pulled another trash bag. This time, It contained a 1993 printed work schedule, some 1996 receipts, and one item that made them freeze at the lab table, a piece of a Kodak photo album cover, the kind sold with Kodak Express scanners in the 1990s. In an emergency meeting, Danner laid the glue tube, the peeled photo corners, and the Kodak cover on the table. All of these matched the characteristics of the Denmark photo folder. If someone kept those pictures, they might also have kept the originals, or the original album. Danner didn't draw a conclusion, but everyone in the room understood. It was very possible Vance was the person who kept, or was directly connected to the photos that ended up scanned in Denmark. And if that was true, his current destruction of old documents could mean he felt ready for something, or had started to sense danger. In the final week of surveillance, Vance's routine didn't change: work, home, burn old papers, quiet life. But for the cold case team, they now had enough to see the picture getting sharper every day, glue matching the 1991 photos, old Kodak album pieces, regular burning of notebooks, unusual trash timing, timeline alignment. Ready or not, Vance had stepped into the spotlight, and after 30 days of surveillance, Fresno PD knew the next step: obtain a search warrant. But just as they were preparing the paperwork for the judge, an unexpected event would push the case into its most intense phase yet. At 3:47 a.m., the lead Fresno PD vehicle rolled silently into a Clovis suburb. It was still pitch black, early summer temperatures had dropped, and a thin mist clung to the rooftops. Inside each car, SWAT members and the cold case team sat silent, focused on the mission they had rehearsed for 3 weeks: execution of a federal judge-signed search warrant on Gregory Vance's home. Vance wasn't considered armed and dangerous, and had no priors, but per protocol for a suspect potentially linked to child abduction, Fresno PD used a controlled high-speed entry to minimize risk. 4:03 a.m., the SWAT van stopped a short distance away, headlights off, only the red glow of dashboard clocks visible. Over the radio, the commander's voice came low and firm: Alpha Team, in position. Bravo Team, lock the rear, hold for go. Vance's house was a single-story, small front yard, dark window shades, indistinguishable from hundreds of others in Old Clovis. No warning signs, no lights inside, but to the cold case team, that house held what they had been searching for over 21 years. 4:11 a.m., SWAT commander raised his hand. 1 second, 2 seconds, 4:12 a.m., go, go, go. Boots pounded concrete, a breacher struck the door once, frame splintered. Shouts: police, search warrant. A nightstand lamp flicked on inside. Vance appeared at the end of the hallway in an old t-shirt, hands up. The instant flashlight beams hit his eyes. No resistance, just a shaky, okay, okay. 4:14 a.m., Vance cuffed and led to the front porch. Danner stepped onto the porch, eyes locked on the man he had chased for months. He said nothing. Procedure was procedure. Inside, the search team began room by room. Almost immediately the interior revealed something odd. Everything was too neat. Not the neatness of a tidy homeowner, but the neatness of someone who constantly cleaned to erase traces. Living room bare. Bedroom unnaturally tidy. No photo albums. No memory boxes. No personal papers older than 5 years. In the kitchen they found a small metal burn barrel, the same kind Vance used outside. Inside were thin ashes, but because it was a low-heat household barrel, many paper fragments hadn't fully burned. Forensics collected everything, but the biggest discovery wasn't in the living room or kitchen, it was in the garage. When 2 cold case members flipped on the garage light, the whole space flooded bright. Tools lined up perfectly, boxes of old clothes, metal shelves of equipment, and in the far corner, under a dusty gray tarp, something that made the entire team freeze: an old 35mm film scanner, produced in the early 1990s, and extremely rare in working condition. It sat next to a plastic bin, containing slide frames and strips of old film. An investigator gently lifted the tarp. Flashlight beam hit the logo, Kodak RFS 2035, the exact model used in Kodak Express shops from 1995, and capable of producing the exact type of scans found in the Danish folder. But that wasn't all. Next to the scanner was a small faded yellow Kodak 35mm film canister, handwritten in black marker on the lid, EOG 91. The team stopped breathing. For several seconds no one spoke. The garage seemed to stand still. A gloved officer slowly lifted the canister, felt its weight, then cracked the lid, just enough to confirm the film roll inside was unprocessed. It had sat in darkness for 21 years, never taken to a lab, never exposed to light. If this roll contained photos from August 1991, and if the Denmark scan was only a copy, this could be the untouched original. As they sealed the canister into evidence, Danner walked into the garage, looked at the scanner, the canister, then toward the house, as if staring through time. "He kept everything," one investigator whispered. "But he hid it better than we thought." While SWAT walked Vance to a patrol car and held him in secure custody pending interrogation, forensics continued collecting every related item: 35mm scanner, EOG 91 film canister, loose film strips in the plastic bin, partially burned documents from the burned barrel, a box containing old Kodak equipment, 4:52 a.m. Initial phase of the search warrant complete. The sky behind the Clovis rooftops began to lighten. No one said it out loud, but the entire team knew this was the first time they had touched physical evidence that might hold the real answers. They didn't yet know what was on the roll: warehouse photos, the little girl, the man behind the camera, or just ordinary shots. But for the first time in 21 years, Fresno PD held something they could see, touch, and take to a lab, and that could change everything about the case. The raid had just ended when Fresno PD immediately split the seized evidence from Vance's garage and house into 3 categories: photos, equipment, documents, and rushed them to the FBI lab in Sacramento to prevent any damage or contamination. No one on the cold case team wanted a single mistake with what might be the most critical pieces in 21 years. Decoding the AGA 91 film roll. At the FBI darkroom, the Kodak film roll was opened under strict light control protocol. As the strip slid through the developer, the imaging analysts practically held their breath. No one knew what would appear, maybe just landscapes, old warehouse shots, or a completely blank roll. But when the first negative strip dried and appeared under the faint red safe light, a forensic technician whispered, "Jesus, there's a child in the frame." A total of 17 frames remained intact, and among them, 3 photographs that made the entire team stop dead. 3 previously unreleased images of Emily Hartwell, never seen, never entered into any 1991 file. First photo, Emily standing inside a warehouse next to a large metal drum. The overhead low-pressure sodium lighting matched exactly the pattern analyzed in the Denmark image. Second photo, Emily sitting on a low wooden stool, looking down at the floor, not crying, not panicked, just an odd still posture, as if told to stay put. Third photo, Emily standing very close to the lens, only half a shoulder and hairline visible, the rest blocked by the photographer's shadow. Most crucially, all 3 were taken in an enclosed space with the corrugated Series 180C steel door in the background, identical to the door in the Denmark photo. The film didn't say who took the pictures, but the location was almost certain, one of the 2 warehouses previously identified. When Danner looked at the 3 photos, he sat in silence for a long time. He knew, this was no longer a missing person case, it was a detention. But Vance was not yet convicted. There was only evidence that he possessed the photos. The Fresno map discovery, pinpoint level in the second cardboard box from the garage, one the SWAT team almost overlooked, because it looked like nothing but old paperwork. Investigators found a worn Fresno map. One corner was torn, the paper yellowed, but 3 things instantly grabbed attention. On the map, 3 red wax pencil circles marked industrial or vacant areas in 1991 Fresno 1. Bellamy Industrial Park, Clovis 2. North Weber Distribution Lot, Fresno 3. A warehouse complex demolished in 2003 near Jensen Avenue, never mentioned in any 1991 investigative file. The third circle, the demolished site, was the shock. That location had been privately owned in 1991. Its records never entered the system before demolition. There had been zero reason to bring it up in the original investigation, yet Vance had circled it. This gave Danner chills. If he circled it in 1991, why? If he circled it after 1991, what for? No one had an answer. The light-colored jacket finally revealed opening Vance's bedroom closet. The search team initially found only plain clothes, t-shirts, jeans, old shoes, no beige jacket, but in the garage, rolled up under a torn cardboard box, forensics uncovered something that made them call for extra lights: a beige polyester jacket, cross-woven collar, exact style of the rare line sold in Clovis 1989, 1992, shiny metal buttons that reflected light in the exact pattern seen in the Denmark photo. The jacket was no longer new, collar worn, sleeves stained, but the buttons, fiber type and color, all matched the FBI material analysis perfectly. Danner said nothing when he saw it. He simply motioned for it to be bagged and noted, cross-match with 180C warehouse photo reflection. Shock evidence: the unlabeled key, in a metal drawer in the garage, among nails, screwdrivers and random tools. An investigator found a single key on a blank key ring, no tag, no label. The key was old, head worn, shaft scratched lengthwise. At first they thought it was just an old storage unit or cabinet key, but when compared to 1991 warehouse door keys from North Weber and Bellamy, no match. A technician identified the blank as a 1980s Sargent Queso series, used for private warehouses and temporary storage, not any of the industrial sites Fresno PD had ever investigated. What did this mean? Either Vance once had access to a private warehouse not in police records, or the key belonged to a location the 1991 case never touched, or worse, the key led to an entirely different place where the photos were taken. Danner placed the key on the table, stared at it for a long time, and said, "We have a fourth location. One no one has ever checked." No one in the room said another word. Everyone understood. That key was the biggest twist in the entire case so far, a knot that could change the whole timeline. By the end of the first day of analysis, the Fresno cold case team no longer felt they were simply pursuing a suspect. They were standing in front of a buried map of truth, with four main pieces: 3 photos of Emily inside a warehouse, a Fresno map, with 3 strategic red circles, the exact rare beige jacket, a key leading to a completely new place. No one yet knew where that place was. No one yet knew what was inside, but everyone understood. The journey to the truth about Emily Hartwell was about to turn down its most dangerous path. The Fresno PD interrogation room felt colder than usual that morning. Whether from the air conditioning, or the heavy silence, no one could tell, but when Gregory Vance was brought in, he looked more dazed than defiant. He didn't ask why he was there, didn't immediately demand a lawyer, both strange and suspicious. Vance simply placed his hands on the table, fingers laced, and let out a long sigh, as if he had been waiting for this moment for years. Detective Mark Danner opened by telling Vance they had recovered the photos, the scanner, the film roll, and the map with 3 red circles. Danner did not mention Emily or any charge. He only said, "You know why we're talking." Vance closed his eyes for several seconds, then spoke his first words after 21 years of silence. "I kept the kid, just a few days." The room went dead still. Danner showed no reaction, only asked him to explain exactly what kept meant. Vance said he had taken Emily into a warehouse in Fresno, but immediately added something that made the FBI sit up. "It wasn't just me, there was a second guy. He's the one who wanted to keep her longer." Danner asked for a name. Vance shook his head. "I never really knew, he just told me to call him Rook, a nickname, unverifiable, no address, no clear description. No forensic trace of a second person had ever appeared in the photos." Vance continued that he didn't hurt Emily, that he only stood watch for a few hours, and the second man was the one who took the pictures. He claimed that when he realized things were going the wrong way, he left the warehouse and never went back. Contradictions surfaced immediately. First, Lighting and shadow forensics from the film and the Denmark photo showed only one person behind the camera, no sign of a second individual. Second, if Vance left a few hours later, why were there 3 photos of Emily in 3 different poses, indicating an extended shooting session? Third, Rook, an untraceable identity, sounded like an attempt to shift blame. The FBI jumped in right after the report. One agent asked point blank, "If you only kept Emily a few days, who kept her after that?" Vance dropped his head, hands clenched white. "I don't know, I swear I don't know." He said he'd take her somewhere else, but forensics supported none of the second person claims. No second set of shoe prints in the warehouse photos. No second reflection in the glass. No physical trace on the fence fiber, matching any clothing except the beige jacket. No second tire mark besides the suspected chevron from Vance's Econoline. Was Vance telling part of the truth, or inventing a second person to minimize his own role? Danner watched Vance's body language, not a practiced liar, but not fully panicked either. When asked why he kept the scanner, the film, the jacket, and the map with 3 circled locations, Vance answered in a choked voice, "I didn't dare throw them away. I didn't know what to do. I thought one day he might come back." Who was he? Forensics had no trace of him. The photos had no trace of him. The warehouses had no shift records involving anyone else. The interrogation lasted another 2 hours. All Vance repeated, over and over, were 3 points. 1. He kept Emily only a few days. 2. A second person was in charge. 3. He didn't know what happened to Emily after he left the warehouse. When the FBI compared the statement to the evidence, an internal report was filed. Vance's statement does not match forensic findings. High probability only portions are true, the rest deliberate concealment or distortion. Even though Vance admitted involvement in holding Emily, his statement opened a more terrifying possibility. The 1991 case might not have involved just one person, but forensics had only ever seen one. The case was moving into a gray zone, where statement and evidence no longer aligned, and where the truth began to split into 2 paths. One path was what Vance said, the other was what forensics proved. The investigation following Gregory Vance's half-true, half-false confession entered its final phase when Fresno PD, the FBI, and the Sacramento lab ran a series of combined analyses, tests impossible in 1991, but now decisive. If Vance's story was murky, forensics was not. DNA cross-check, the final breakthrough among the evidence seized from Vance's house, the rare beige polyester jacket, played the key role. On the inside collar, where it would contact skin when worn, a very small amount of epithelial cells remained. 2012 DNA technology was sensitive enough to extract dozens of markers, not a full profile, but enough for comparison with indirect 1991 samples. In Fresno PD's old evidence vault, the shirt Emily wore the day she vanished had been preserved cold in a zip bag. Forensic technicians located a single small hair of Emily's, still attached to the collar, from when it was collected. Degradation was severe, but enough markers remained for comparison. When the lab ran the cross-check, the report flashed a line that made the entire team jump to their feet. Profile match probability consistent with secondary transfer, origin consistent with suspect exposure. In plain terms, Vance's DNA was on Emily's shirt, via close contact, most likely during the disappearance window. It could not prove homicide, but it was enough to plainly discredit the claim. "I only stood far away," the second person made contact. Solidify that Vance himself was in close proximity to Emily while she was detained. DNA was the piece no one had in 1991. Photo data, reconstructing the August 1991 timeline. The AG 91 film roll, combined with the scanned files from Denmark, allowed the FBI to reconstruct a technically precise timeline. First photo, Emily standing by the warehouse door, harsh light in still daylight hours. Second photo, Emily sitting inside the warehouse, strong sodium light and most likely taken after sunset. Third photo, close-up of Emily, man's reflection visible later time, camera much closer, light distance, aperture settings, and shadow direction indicated at least 2 separate days of photography, not just a few hours, as Vance claimed. This completely demolished his statement, I was only there a few hours and left. A Sacramento forensic specialist said bluntly, photos tell the truth better than people. Statement cross-check. Contradictions laid bare. Every part of Vance's statement was checked against forensics. I only kept her a few hours. Photos show at least 48 hours inside the warehouse. I never touched Emily. DNA proves close contact. There was a second person. No second set of footprints. No second tire mark. No second reflection. I didn't take the pictures. 35mm scanner, photo glue, undeveloped film, all found at Vance's house. The only part that might be true, Emily was once inside a warehouse. Everything else collapsed. Plea deal, the legal turning point under the weight of the forensic evidence, and the mystery key that didn't fit any known warehouse. Vance's attorney knew that going to trial on first-degree murder carried a near-certain death sentence, or life without parole, even without a body. So they asked to negotiate. Fresno PD agreed, if Vance would 1. Plead guilty to child abduction. 2. Plead guilty to second-degree murder, no premeditation. 3. Turn over every related location, and fully disclose his 1991 movements. Vance agreed in silence, saying only one sentence, I know I'm not getting out of this anymore. In the plea transcript, Vance admitted taking Emily from Cedar Avenue, holding her for many days, and that Emily did not survive. He still clung to the second-person story, but the federal prosecutor noted in the file, no physical evidence, or third-party testimony, supports the second person's claim. Statement deemed unreliable. Sentence, 25 years to life. In November 2014, Gregory Vance stood in Fresno County Superior Court. The courtroom was so quiet, the turning of pages could be heard. No character witnesses, no plea for leniency, only the guilty plea, the forensics, and 21 years of waiting. The judge read the sentence, Gregory Allen Vance, child abduction, second-degree murder, 25 years to life. No one in the room took a deep breath when the gavel fell. It didn't bring Emily back. It didn't explain every mystery. It didn't reveal where the fourth key led. But after more than 2 decades, the case finally had a legal endpoint, and one man held accountable in a court of law. After Gregory Vance's 25 to life sentence, the Emily Hartwell file was officially closed under procedure, but inside Fresno PD, not a single investigator considered the case finished. What they knew enough to convict was still only part of a larger picture. 3 key pieces remained unanswered, each a shadow clear enough to see its shape, but never sharp enough to name the truth. And in the final operational summary, the Fresno cold case team recorded 3 major questions, the kind that haunt long-term American cases, solved but never perfect. The key, a door that never opened. Of all the evidence seized from Vance's house, the 1980s Sergeant Queso series key haunted the team. Most, it didn't open any door at the 2 confirmed warehouses, it didn't match the locks at the 3rd, demolished site circled on the map. Cross-checks of 1980s, 90s lock records showed this key type was used for privately rented storage units, personal garages, or temporary shipping containers. No storage facility in the Fresno area still had records of those keys. Most small businesses had long closed or relocated. The key was worn on the edges, signs of frequent use, but they never discovered which door it once opened. The only certainty, Vance kept that key for years after 1991, meaning there was still a 4th location, one that never appeared in any investigative file. Was it connected to Emily, or just a place Vance once worked? No one knows, and that is what makes the key the biggest open piece of evidence. The 3rd red circle on the map, a location never searched on the map, recovered from the garage. 3 sites were circled, the first 2 matched forensics, and were where the photos were taken. But the 3rd, near Jensen Avenue, led to a warehouse complex demolished in 2003 for new housing. Construction records for the old site had virtually vanished, they were never digitized, and the paper files were lost when the owner went bankrupt. No one remembered what was in those units, who rented them, or how they were used in 1991. So why did Vance circle it? Did he once make deliveries there, or was it a stop he and Emily made in the timeline that was never reconstructed? Investigators called it the Jensen Black Hole, a place that could only be marked on a map, never verified. The child's shoe print that wasn't Emily's, the ghost of another possibility, the small shoe print behind the convenience store, collected the first night of the disappearance, was evidence Fresno PD could never explain. It wasn't Emily's. It didn't match any verified neighborhood child. No witness mentioned a second child with Emily. Vance never mentioned another child either. Forensics showed no sign of a second child inside the warehouse, but the print was real, stamped, logged in 1991, undeniable. It only left two possibilities: a neighbor kid who stood there days earlier, or another child present on Cedar Avenue during the incident window. No forensics ever confirmed a connection, but it was never fully ruled out either, and like every decades-long true crime case, the operational conclusion didn't close with satisfaction. It closed with honesty. The Emily Hartwell case has been resolved in a court of law. However, certain investigative elements remain unverifiable due to time, documentation, and physical evidence limitations. Emily was mentioned one last time in the briefing room. Vance was transferred into the California prison system. The file was closed, but the three questions, the ownerless key, the demolished Jensen warehouse, and the nameless child's shoe print remained. Three quiet shadows reminding everyone that even a truth delivered in court can still have pieces that are never whole. A case was broken. A perpetrator was convicted. But the mystery stayed open, exactly the nature of a true crime story Fresno will never forget. The 1991 Fresno story is not just a 21-year cold case, it is a powerful reminder of gaps in community safety and the importance of personal vigilance in modern American life. Emily vanishing on a short walk from home to the convenience store is stark proof that most child abductions in the U.S. happen within a 1-mile radius of home. Details like early investigative errors, police chasing false neighbor tips, or the tiny fiber and chevron tire mark being dismissed show how one small mistake can derail a search for years. This reminds American families today that when children travel alone, even in familiar neighborhoods, appropriate supervision measures are essential, teaching danger awareness, sharing routes, regular phone check-ins. The story also underscores the value of data preservation and technology. The truth only emerged thanks to case file digitization, forensic photo analysis, and the Danish police discovering 1991 scanned images, proof that investment in security technology, cameras, data systems and international cooperation is indispensable in modern society. Moreover, the existence of the unidentified key, the demolished warehouse, and the unexplained child's shoe print remind us that some mysteries are never fully resolved. The lesson here is not fear, but awareness. Communities, families, and law enforcement need proactivity, vigilance, and mutual support to prevent such tragedies from repeating. If you want to keep following cases that seemed lost to time, but were suddenly cracked, like Emily Hartwell's story, hit subscribe so you don't miss any. Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video, where we'll dive deeper into America's still unsolved mysteries.